Hello, here we are again with yet another book review. Today we're going to talk about Mathematics Without Apologies, Portrait of a Problematic Vocation by Michael Harris. So, really interesting book, really unusual one, as I'll comment in a minute. So, let's get talking about it. So, the first thing we should probably say is what can I say about this book? Well, let's start with an introduction about the author. So the author is Michael Harris. You've got a picture of him here. He is a pure mathematician, and he works in the areas, I think, of arithmetic geometry, from what he says in the book, and connected with the Langlands program. He's a professor in Paris and in Columbia, I think it was. Yeah, Columbia University. And this is not, nevertheless, your typical popularization of math. This is more like an exploration of the field of mathematics, of the mathematicians and the work they do there from different perspectives: cultural, ethical, philosophical, sociological. In the preface, like Harris admits that writing a book about mathematics is very difficult, and this is not really a book about mathematics, although it contains some mathematics, but more about the problem of writing a book about mathematics and what such books tend to fail or to simplify. So, there are some usual popular narratives that explain what is mathematics, what mathematicians do, why what mathematicians do has value. And these are part of the general apologetics, which the title of the book references, although critically. The three main arguments are usually what the author calls the golden goose argument, which is the usefulness argument. Mathematics, including pure mathematics, eventually proves useful. You can make that case for cryptography or physics or technology. The second argument is the truth argument. Mathematics offers privileged access to universal eternal truths and does so better than other disciplines. And finally, there's a beautiful argument, the beauty argument. Mathematics is an art form that can be pursued like some of the disciplines in the humanities for its aesthetic purity. Now, Harris is not very satisfied with any of these three explanations, and he criticizes them at length in different parts of the book. Basically, he feels they're not completely wrong, but they're insufficient. They fail to capture the full range of why mathematicians engage in their practice, why the vocation draws them in to begin with, and why it persists even when external justification is absent or impossible or no longer believed in. A key idea that he explores is this subjective personal drive, this personal ambition, this emotional investment that drives mathematicians, the pathos of mathematics, if you wish. So he explored this from many angles. So mathematics is for Harris a vocation. That's in the title, a problematic vocation, with its cultural rituals and its internal hierarchies. It's also a field full of compromises and Faustian bargains with external forces. It's a site where personal passion and social structures coexist and intersect. It's also a discipline that is often misrepresented by both external accounts and even by the mathematicians themselves when they try to make a public justification of their field. And it's also an area with ambiguous ethical implications, especially as mathematical knowledge gets put into the service of technological and financial systems. What else can I say? Well, the core problem, as we said, that Harris is addressing is what's the justification for what mathematicians do, especially pure mathematicians? Why or how do they explain to outsiders why mathematics deserves resources, respect, and social legitimacy, and why the traditional justifications we mentioned, utility, truth, and beauty, are inadequate? When Harris tries to explain or give a possible alternative to these arguments, One of the key ideas he latches onto is the idea of a relaxed field. I think he takes this from the sociology of science. I think he quotes the recently deceased Alistair MacIntyre. So mathematics is a relaxed field, and this means that, in many fields, like in the sciences, research is constrained by competition for funding, external relevance, technological application. But in pure mathematics, at least for the time being, the field enjoys a protected autonomy. Most projects are not tied to external demands. Mathematicians are not accountable really to economical or political interests in their choice of problems and research. And this allows pure mathematics to operate according to its own internal norms and values, largely shaped by their own practitioners. It's not an absolute, this relaxed autonomy, but it explains much of the distinctive feel of mathematical research when compared to, say, biology or experimental physics or engineering. Along with this notion of a relaxed field, there's the notion of charisma, which regulates this relative autonomy within mathematics. So I think it takes this concept from Max Weber. He says, mathematical research is structured and its research fields are structured around charismatic figures who possess technical ability, but also an intellectual authority that allows them to attract followers, define important problems, and set standards. These usually become the leaders of research programs that subsist for decades or even centuries. Two examples that get explained at greater length in the book are Alexander Grothendieck and Langlands. This charisma becomes routinized as the followers adopt the leader's vision, methodologies, and language, which become the new norms. And this hierarchical structure of mathematics and mathematical prestige operates through these informal yet very real mechanisms of status, of reputation, and lineage. So in short, even though mathematics outwardly presents itself as a realm of pure reason, its actual organization functions through human social structures, which include elements of authority, ambition, status, competition, and intellectual discipleship. What else could we mention? Let me see. Well, we're going to go quickly through all the chapters of the book. It has 10 chapters with some intermediate sections, but we will go through it little by little. First thing to say, I already mentioned it, the book is very unconventional. It feels sometimes like a juxtaposition of 3 or 4 different books. Instead of going in a straight line through a unified argument, you have this collage of fragments, of digressions, of case studies, of personal reflections. It's also not really an apology. It's mathematics without apologies. In the end, it just refuses to reduce mathematics to any one simple thing, while at the same time affirming its enduring complexity and human significance. And it's a problematic vocation, that's also in the title. Probably problematic for a variety of reasons. One of them is because it's entangled with worldly institutions and interests in spite of its purity, but also because mathematicians are always working on problems, technical and existential, and also problematic because how mathematicians perceive themselves and their discipline is an unstable divide between how they actually feel that and the public narratives about mathematics. So it really mixes a lot of stuff. This book is, to some extent, a history of mathematics, because of the historical examples it gives. It's a philosophy of mathematics, especially we will talk about it in a minute when it distinguishes philosophical attitudes. Mathematics, philosophy of mathematics with a capital M and philosophy of mathematics with a small m. It's a sociology of mathematics, and it's also popular mathematical writing. Okay, let's go through the book chapter by chapter. Well, the first thing you might notice is, besides the normal chapters, well, I'm not sure if you can see it well. This is the index. So besides the normal numbered chapters, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, you have some chapters with Greek letters. Chapter Alpha, how to explain number theory at a dinner party, first session primes. Chapter Beta, how to explain number theory at a dinner party, second session equations. So let's first comment on that. So you have the book with the different chapters, and there's like a mini book that goes all throughout this book, which is the germ of a popular math book explaining number theory to a lay audience. And it's based on a real experience that the author had. He once had a dinner party at which an actress was there, and he was given the less than ideal task of trying to explain to the actress what he and the people in his department did. But he got the idea from there to make these sections in this book. And these different sections, the first one about primes, the second about equations, third one about transcendental numbers, fourth one about congruences, and the last one about order and randomness. They're very interesting, and they are a mini introduction to, these number theoretic aspects. So, for example, equations. Well, this explains you equations in one variable, equations in two variables, how they're solved. Equations in two variables, I think he explains. Gauss already solved them. And, well, this part is like the more mathematically heavy part of the book, with formulas, with equations, exploring how numbers appear as solutions to problems. As to equations, for example, they first appear as the result of geometric manipulations. That's how irrational numbers appear for the first time. Then through algebra, how numbers are seen as solutions to equations. There are different types of equations with, as we mentioned, they can have one variable or more than one variable. And they can be linear equations or quadratic. At least one of the unknowns is a square or cubic, and so on and so forth. And cubics are very interesting because they are at the cutting edge of current research. That is, equations with two variables and of a third degree, most of which are, I think, elliptic curves, are really the cutting edge of some areas of number theory right now, algebraic number theory and maybe algebraic geometry. They are connected, in fact, some big problems that were solved recently, like Fermat's last theorem. Okay, so that's like a mini book inside the book. But now let's go and take a look at the other chapters in the book. So the first one is an introduction, the veil, which is a very good metaphor of how mathematicians resist having their work being made transparent to outsiders. So this veil is not just the difficulty or abstraction of math, but also to the professional insularity and mystique of the mathematical profession, which is probably a self-defense mechanism because, along with those trite arguments of why mathematics is a valid area of research, because if they were to agree and state publicly what Harris states are the reasons for doing mathematics, is just an enjoyable experience of exploration of another reality and of why the answers that are discovered in that reality are necessary, people would consider it too indulgent and not serious and not worthy of economic investment. So after the veil, chapter 2, How I Acquired Charisma, introduces us to a semi-biographical narrative that is going to be a thread throughout the book. That's one of the threads that you could say organizes the book. It's the story of how Michael Harris entered mathematics, became a professional mathematician, was relatively successful, contributed with a significant theorem and some research to the Langlands program. So he acquired prestige and charisma, and he became a mathematician. But anyway, this first chapter, How I Acquired Charisma, introduces us to his early age, how he joins mathematics, and it's the most sociological of all the chapters. It's the one that explains how mathematics is this field with Weberian charisma, where you follow these invisible mechanisms of prestige and how you acquire this charisma by studying mathematics, wanting to solve problems, joining a research group, how you performatively become a mathematician. Chapter 3, not merely good, true, and beautiful, seems like a detour, so it moves away from the personal experiences of the author, and it explores and critically deconstructs the common justifications of mathematics we mentioned before: truth, beauty, and utility. So he says truth is a complicated matter. We had issues on foundations of mathematics that brought these ideas of truth to a questionable stage, and even if you accept these, he contrasts how most mathematicians are not worried about typical truth and foundational problems of mathematics, which interest philosophers of mathematics with capital M, issues of logic, uses of foundation, etc. Most mathematicians are not really worried about that in their everyday practice, and they don't delve in that. Also, I'm not sure if it's in this chapter or later on, when he criticizes the view of mathematics as just an area for searching truth, he really underscores how uncongenial this is to mathematicians by talking about the possibilities that computer programs that follow formalist frames and that might chug out theorems, how these machines and their pros are not really felt by mathematicians as something of real value. Like, mathematicians don't just want a machine to chug out a theorem that is true. They want to discover and explore why it is true. And proofs that are amenable to this sort of explanation are more valued than purely mechanical proofs, computer-assisted ones like the one for the four-color theorem. So that's the criticism of the truth view of the justification of mathematics. Utility, the golden goose argument, is often exaggerated and post-rationalized, and also it could be valid for applied mathematicians, but not for pure ones. The beauty criteria is complicated. The metaphor of mathematics as an artistic endeavor searching for beauty generates a lot of problems. The first one, well, apart from the typical ones of elitism and cultural conditioning, art itself today is arguably not about beauty. And he makes the argument that it's not so much beauty as such as pleasure what really motivates mathematicians, although beauty is like the more philosophically and neutral and acceptable way of referring to it. But as I mentioned, ultimately he thinks that mathematics justifies itself by its practice. It's not reducible to a moral or an epistemic framework. Okay, the next chapter, chapter 4, Megalopropeia, is in a way a continuation of chapter 3, but also a departure. This is basically a chapter in which he criticizes the relationship of mathematics with finance. Very critical. This chapter talks about the 2008 crisis, about the rise of the quants in financial modeling, derivatives markets, how much mathematicians are to blame for this. It's a very ironic and biting chapter. The metaphor that pervades it is the Faustian bargain, the seduction of mathematical talent into these ethically compromised roles. Okay. The next chapter is a really crazy one. Chapter 5, an automorphic reading of Thomas Pynchon's Against the Day, interrupted by elliptical reflections on Mason and Dixon. I don't know how to describe this chapter. It's an exercise at some literary criticism of these two novels of Thomas Pynchon, which I haven't read them, but they apparently make a lot of use of mathematical metaphors. And, he uses Harris tries to use mathematical concepts which appear in passing in the works as structuring devices that explain the organization of the novels. Okay, this is the type of playful postmodern type of writing that I would expect more in a book of literary criticism and not in a book about mathematics. Anyway, chapter 6, further investigations of the mind-body problem. This one explores what it feels like to do mathematics. He develops it in this chapter as some sort of embodied, emotional, even spiritual practice. And also in this chapter he explains things like the myth of the mad genius and the romantic mathematical hero. I think it's in this chapter too that he also talks about how mathematicians were, felt as romantic and attractive guys in the 18th century. He also refers this film, The Rights of Math and Death, Rights of Love and Math, that Edward Frankel made, which is a take on a Yukio Mishima movie also about desire and death and so on. Okay, weird chapter, like the previous one. Chapter 7, the habit of clinging to an ultimate ground. This connects with mathematics as truth, with the foundationalist impulse in mathematics, the desire for ultimate certainty. So here he talks about, typical things like Gödel's incompleteness theorem, formalism, logicism, set theory. Also a bit about category theory and alternatives to the foundations, like there's this Russian guy, Voivodsky, who proposes an alternative foundation for mathematics. Yeah, Voivodsky. It's called, I don't remember. How did he call it? This also connects with category theory and, as I said, alternative visions of foundations for mathematics. No, I'm not going to find the name of this work that Voivodsky does. No, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So this chapter explores these ideas. I think the univalent foundations was the name. But one thing that this chapter develops is not only that obsession with foundations is only a part of mathematics and that a lot of mathematicians are not really interested in it. Foundations can be built on the run. So sometimes it's not like you build the foundations and then you build the math on top. It's like you have these visions that great mathematicians like Grothendieck have of where mathematics should be developing, and given those visions, you start working as if it were backwards from them to, going back to those, to the justification of those foundations, which are no longer foundations, they're more like floating in the sky, if it were. They're no longer an ultimate ground, but more like a floating world. And so here, infinity categories in this, and these topics are explored. Univalent foundations in different stuff, with a lot of mysticism and Buddhist influences baked into the mixture. Okay, the next chapter, Science of Tricks, chapter 8. Yeah, so this explores how mathematics includes performance, canning, sleight of hand, tricks that allow mathematicians to get elegant proofs of doubting results. These proofs have an ambivalent status. Some mathematicians hate them because they see them as lazy shortcuts or as tricks. He explores the use of the vocabulary of tricks in mathematical history, its connection to mechanics, to different views of mathematics as a pure art form versus as a mechanical, useful series of techniques. But anyway, yeah, a very, very curious and interesting chapter. Okay, after this we have chapter 9, A Mathematical Dream and Its Interpretation. Here we go back to the biographical aspects of the book. Harris talks about an experience he had where he had this dream, and it serves him to debate issues or typical views of mathematics as intuitive, arising from subconscious thought. And yeah, he explores that in this chapter. And again, he includes a lot of personal biography, how through this dream he got to work at a time in his life when he was in an impasse in work that led him to collaborate in the Langlands program and therefore to acquire some of the charisma that he was talking about at the beginning of the book. And finally, the last chapter, No Apologies, again closes the circle and the subversion of the Hardy-esque mathematical apology in the title of the book. And he summarizes that, he rejects these traditional apologies and offers an anti-apology. Math doesn't need to be justified by utility, beauty, or truth. It's a cultural, an ethical, and imaginative activity whose value is internal. Yeah, and I would say that's, as we started at the beginning, that's the core message of the book. Okay, so I think that's it. Weird book, interesting book. I really recommend it. I give it 5 stars and think you should give it a go.